You're live.
We are live, so welcome everybody to this episode of the Center for Digital Inquiry TV, CDI TV, at the University of Warwick. I am Carolina Bandinelli, and I am realizing my childhood dream of being a TV presenter, and that is the main reason you're here today. You might have noticed the aficionados might have noticed that Michael, my co-host, Michael Dieter, co-host and CDI co-director, is not here. And that's why I have taken the chance to stand up and do a proper audition. I'll see it as an audition for the next Eurovision. So I am going to try to be very good at presenting our guest today. And I've taken some notes, but that doesn't mean that I'll pronounce the name correctly and that I'll be able to properly match name, affiliations, and titles, okay? So, but mistakes, glitches, experiments are really part of our process. So, today, our topic is AI and politics. Now, these are little bit of buzzwords. Today, nowadays, everybody talks about AI and not necessarily knowing what they're talking about. Definitely, I don't know what I am talking about when I talk about AI, and that's why I'll be soon joined by people that know, by people that can help us thinking through what the hell is artificial intelligence. We even have a computer scientist, so interdisciplinarity, thick boxes. I'm just talking to the high-level people at Warwick here for my promotion, not the Eurovision one, the academic one. Interdisciplinarity. And then we want to explore what are the issues that AI may pose on society, possibly sort of going beyond and ahead and on the side of the either super apocalyptic or techno enthusiast accounts. And then we also want to explore whether AI can be used for good things or to tackle some important societal challenges. So when with Sanjay Sharma, that will soon join me on this stage, when with Sanjay Sharma, we thought about organizing these, we really talk about, okay, can we start thinking of a critical AI fields of studies or areas of thought, and what would it mean? So this is sort of I don't know if it is a pilot, I don't know if it is a laboratory, but definitely is not something that is very, fixed, determined, and all done, all known. So it's something in theory, it's something in progress, and we'll try to think together. That's why feel free to intervene at any moment. And also, I'll tell you this later, building some suspense. So, can I invite Sanjay Sharma to join me here? And Sanjay is actually the co-organizer of this event. So maybe you should because we are Eurovisioning. We are rehearsing. We are rehearsing for the big guys up there. And Sanjay Sharma is an associate professor at the Center for Interdisciplinary Methodologies at Warwick. And you work a lot on data and justice, data justice and AI, ethnicity, AI and racism. So you'll tell us more about it in a sec. But maybe you can have a seat. And also, because this idea was a little bit more yours than mine, in that you were the one really saying, okay, let's think about a critical AI. So maybe to start with, I ask you, before calling the other guests, super quick, if you can tell us, what do you have in mind when you think about critical AI?
First of all, it's great to be here, and maybe slightly pause, and I've kind of rethought the phrase of critical AI, because if anyone follows the debate, there's a proliferation of sort of prefixes on AI: ethical AI, critical AI, responsible AI, and I work in those sorts of fields. And there's an author called Yarden Katz who wrote a book called Artificial Intelligence, and he questions this prefixing of AI because it tends to not question what AI is itself, what's the object of study here. So when we named, we've had a day of events. When we named the day of events, we actually called it critical dialogues on AI, which I think is an important distinction. So very quickly, the field of AI is exploding. Every day you can wake up and there's a new model that's released, or more funding, or some other amazing technology. And for researchers, it's kind of hard to keep up.
Oh, yes.
And whilst there's critical dialogues circulating, for sure, because there's many harms that AI is creating and producing and reproducing, it's still a fairly marginalized discourse. So even while sort of big tech corporations talk about ethical AI, it's very much on their terms, and more distinctive voices are kind of marginalized. So I'm kind of interested in inserting our voices partly into that debate, and also, which we'll talk about later, is to actually question the realities of AI and whether AI is actually creating more problems than it's solving. I'll stop there.
No, but it's so true. There are all of these adjectives just put next to the word AI, and sometimes it's not even clear what AI means. Also, because I think another problem has to do with disciplinary silos and the struggle to communicate across different disciplines and different vocabularies, so that many people like me, like cultural scholars or cultural sociologists, we talk about AI, but we don't really know what we are talking about. So we need to establish more dialogues with people that know what they're talking about. For instance, Tanaya Guha from the University of Glasgow, who is a... Please come, join me. And a round of applause. Yes. So, Tanaya, thank you for being here. And you are a computer scientist. And so we are sure about that.
No.
You see, damn.
Electrical and computer engineer, if I'm being very specific.
Okay, this is even better from the point of view of crossing disciplinary vocabularies and barriers. You work at the University of Glasgow. You are a, what is your title again?
Associate professor.
Associate professor, senior lecturer. And you are part of the social AI group. You are working on a Leverium project on machine learning and remembering older women on screen. We'll talk about it this morning. But to start with, really think about it as an opening statement. What are we talking about when we are talking about AI? For dummies, please, because it's true that I don't understand.
Oh, that's a great question. I think we all need to understand that. So AI, very simply, they're basically mathematical models, statistical models that you can code up in computers, and then you can teach machines to do certain tasks. For example, you can teach a machine to identify between a dog and a cat. So essentially, they're mathematical models programmed and then doing some tasks for us.
And there are plenty of implications on this very sort of apparently simple definition. Okay, and talking about the implications, here I want to invite your the third person working on the Leverium project on machine learning and older women on screen, who's Jo Garde Hansen. So, super round of applause for Jo. So, Jo is a professor on culture, media, and communication at the University of Leeds, where she's also head of school. And she loves theme park that may or may not be relevant, but it is, because it has to do with risk, it has to do with being daring, and also being daring to lead and co-lead on a project that has to do with AI, coming from more of a media and culture background. So can you briefly tell me, or tell us actually, how you got into that? What is your perspective? What kind of entry point did you find for yourself?
Well, the entry point for the work I was doing, or have been doing with Tanaya, was women and ageing. They were invisible, or largely visible, in media, film, television, etc. And we'd done a project years ago, the AHRC, a Women Ageing and Media Network, that was run from the University of Gloucestershire by Professor Ros Jennings. And myself and others like Kristen Gorton, who's now at Leeds, we were really interested in kind of making visible older women. And then I think what came from that was this recognition that there was a tremendous amount of life logging now of older women in social media. And I spoke to Tanaya, and we had a coffee, and we talked about, okay, there's all these older women on screen all the time that are aging on screen, and we got really interested in the messy and disruptive ways in which older women were in film and TV. And you talked to me then, oh, well, you know about the Gina Davis inclusion quotient. And I thought, no, all I knew was, didn't know anything about I didn't even know what an inclusion quotient was. And it was kind of also discovering that, okay, there were computer scientists who were being really thoughtful about their research, and I had met one, and I thought, oh my God, how lucky am I?
When you met one, you're like, okay.
Oh my God, I'll hold on to this person.
Can we intellectually get married?
Yeah, and we were, the thing was, in our field, you're doing really quantitative stuff, and I guess I'm doing really qualitative stuff, and never the twain meets, and I thought, okay, this is such a reach and a bridge between methodologies. But at the same time, we had a shared kind of value system, which was really interesting, kind of values around women and diversity, and who gets to speak, and how long they get to speak, and how visible they are in media. And we were just kind of, okay, there must be ways of bringing this together.
And I was thinking, in a way, like you said, your entry point was through the topics of your research, like the memory aspect, the gender aspect, the media aspect. And in a way, this AI thing, there is a good reason why everybody, also from the social science and humanities and the arts, are thinking, okay, I need to engage with AI. It is a buzzword, yes, but it's also a buzzword for good reasons, because it kind of puts us in the position that we have to rethink our disciplines, and we have to rethink our topics and subjects in light of what, I don't know if it can be called, it's probably a revolution, or to say the least, a technological, hence also cultural shift that of course reproduces certain things, so we shouldn't fall in the trap of, oh, everything is new. But definitely it also has an agency as a medium, and it is very pervasive, so we need to understand. And talking about topics, issues, values, actually, that are rethought and are sort of put in dialogues with the technological and cultural implications of AI, let me welcome Bahareh Heravi. Bahareh. I asked before how to pronounce it. So Bahareh is from the University of Surrey, where she's a reader on AI and media, and you are also a BBC Braid Fellow, right? Did I say good?
That's right.
These are my notes,
All perfect.
Fantastic. And you work, what I understood, so I know Bahareh a little less than the other guests today, so full disclosure, but I'm very happy that I'm getting to know you now. Yes, also very nice look.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because also look matters. We are women on screen. Jokes aside, I really like you. And so I'm happy to ask you, is it correct that you work with AI, democracy, journalism? Is it true?
Is it true?
Is it true or not?
Is that the rumor?
Is that this is sort of a bit of a like true crime narrative. Is it true that you're working with AI and democracy?
So I work on AI and journalism. So AI and media and journalism. And my work at the moment is mostly focused on how journalists use AI. And as part of the BRAID program that Sanjay is also part of, I'm a fellow at the BBC working on responsible AI literacy. For newsrooms and at the BBC. But in terms of the questions that you were asking, are you a computer scientist and where are you coming from? What's your story? You might, it surprises me now to say my background is actually computer science.
Oh, this is a scoop. We already have a scoop talking about journalism.
Yeah, and somehow I managed to move into the journalism sphere from towards the end of my PhD. I can tell you the story if you're asking the stories later, but yeah, that's kind of the area I work on.
Okay, great. And then now, last but not least, is Sebastian Lehuede from King's College. Please come next to me. Sebastian is a senior lecturer in AI and society.
Not yet, only lecturer.
Only lecturer. Okay, I promoted you.
Yeah,
I
we're waiting for
promoted
the
you.
promotion. But yeah.
We are ready for the promotion. When you promote people, it's good. If you drag them down, then they might hold a grudge on you.
True,
So
that's
that's fantastic. But for me, as far as I'm concerned, you can totally be senior lecturer.
That's right.
I have no problem with that.
Tell people at my university.
I'll tell them. Because your research, I found it super interesting. Sebastian came a couple of weeks ago to give a seminar on his research, and he looks at issues around climate change and environmentalism, looking at both the possibilities and the obstacles that AI might pose. So can you tell me, it's a little bit the same question that I asked to Jo. So what was your entry point?
Well, thank you for the invitation. I love this format. It's very interesting. I think
Of
we're not
course.
used to this, so maybe we look a bit nervous because as academics we don't
Not
do this very
nervous, come
often.
on.
So thank you for the invitation.
I'm a mess. How can you feel nervous? Like I'm giving the example.
No, basically, during my PhD, some time ago, I did it about astronomy data in Chile. We can talk about that in more detail, but the governance of astronomy data. And I met some indigenous people from the Atacama Desert affected by the construction of some of these observatories. And when I talked to them about astronomy and all those kind of things, they will tell me, Sebastian, that's important, but we have a more important issue here, which is lithium extraction. And lithium is one of the components that are used to build digital devices, even data centers, which are these buildings key for artificial intelligence, use a lot of lithium. So that took me into, the material footprint of digital technologies. And then after that, I turned to data centers, which are these very important buildings we can talk more about, but always with a focus on communities, people, how they are affected, how they are resisting, how they are negotiating these kind of things. So I look at the environmental impact of artificial intelligence from a more kind of grounded or community perspective, if you want.
And what are you finding out?
I'm finding out that the discussion that we're having at the moment about AI is very exclusionary and very elitist.
Okay, so these are two things that we can think about. Why?
Basically because I think the people who are the most affected by the environmental impact are not part of the discussion usually. And I think they should be, because many of them have very valuable ways of engaging with nature, with the environment, which I think is something we have to highlight in the current context of climate crisis rather than undermine. And I think it will make us, think AI from a different perspective. Most of the times they are not AI abolitionists. even people, resisting data centers, it's not that they are totally against data centers inherently, but they want to, I think we can come up with a vision of AI that's different if we pay more attention to these groups. And, and that's only one example, but, there are also data workers, so many groups that are not part of the discussion.
Okay, now this is really good. I was hoping that you would give me a nice cross and bridge for me to open up the discussion, and you did so. Thank you very much. Also, do we want to say ciao to your mama and papa? Because they are connected.
Yeah,
Ciao.
Yeah. Hola,
Ciao,
hola,
gracias.
hola.
Hola, hola, bienvenidos.
Yeah, I told Carolina that my parents will be looking at me today, so they're on YouTube at the moment.
Okay.
They
Ciao,
don't speak
hola.
English though, but I hope that there's like a live translation or something, so they can understand.
Hopefully.
Using AI, yeah, we can talk about the environmental footprint of that tool.
So,
as well.
exclusionary and elitist, let's say with these two words, because on the one hand, there is a sense of, okay, AI is everywhere, AI is pervasive, AI has been everywhere for a while on our smartphones, and it's already very much part of the way we live our lives. So we are all kind of implicated in a way and co-living with AI, but at the same time, it is exclusionary and elitist. And the way I can think about it is elitist because a lot of people use AI, but not a lot of people have AI literacy. So there is this sort of divide. And also exclusionary because, of course, there are matters of power implicated in who develops AI for what, where the funding comes from, how is that sort of put to work. And when it comes to AI literacy and matters of power, I think that, Bahareh, do you want to add something on it? Maybe you can tell us something more about it. Would you say that's true when you work about AI literacy? Is that the direction you're going in?
So I think I see it in two ways. In a sense, I think AI is democratizing the access to information and the access to technology. On the other hand, it is creating bias and ethical issues that we can talk about a little bit more. But in terms of democratizing, what do I mean with that? If we look at a lot of, so I'm going to look at both sides of it. If we look at certain levels of privileges that people have had, for example, people who are born with language as a native English speaker, they would have forever written much more easily. As you think, you write, and you can very easily get to certain, you can have good proposals, you can have good papers, you can have good dissertations, and so on. And at some level, a kind of divide is being created here. Now using ChatGPT, people who don't have good English, people who are coming from other socio-economical backgrounds have access to certain technologies that could help them create output that could be considered of similar quality. Is it good? Is it bad? Different people will have different views on that. I was in a conference or a workshop where a journalist basically said, I think AI should be used for everything, including information gathering, verification, and so on, but not for writing. In my opinion, it's like, why? Because all the other phases of it, information collection, analysis, verification, and so on, to me, are the main parts, while the words are how I'm going to explain that. If I'm good at explaining, I'll do a good job. If I'm bad at explaining, which I am, I will not do a good job. So to me, that writing may not be considered as the most important thing, while to a journalist or to somebody with very good level of writing in English and so on would be the main output. So we might see this as differently as a tool, as an enhancement, or as a threat, or as something that's destroying the likes of journalism and writing and creativity. But at the same time, certain issues that are being, that AI is creating because of who is developing it, who has power into integrating certain decisions and so on in AI systems, are creating other challenges in societies and creating possibly bigger divides that I'm sure other speakers could also talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And it is about, it's interesting what you said, because it's a similar some parts of what you said, it's similar to the debate that surrounded the internet and basically any new technology. So there is, on the one hand, oh my God, we are going to be substituted by it, we're going to be made obsolete, we're going to lose our memory, we're going to lose our cognitive capacity. And the first, one of the first, at least in the Western tradition, who did it was Socrates in the 5th century before Christ, in his letter against writing, which was then written by Plato, because indeed he wouldn't write. And he was like, oh, writing is going to be the end of our memory, it's going to be the end of our tradition, it's going to be the end of our cognitive ability and the ability to form a community. And now, to us, it seems quite funny, because we see in writing that authenticity of the very analog media and the materiality of paper, etc. But that was not the case. And so, in a way, with AI, it's the same thing. It's about the widening the access to means of production, a little bit what happened with internet, with user-generated content, but even with smartphones, if you think about audiovisual production. But then, on the other hand, these issues of power. And the issues of power are the issues of who produce it. And the issues of who produce it, it goes both ways. One is, of course, the an economic issue, so who's going to profit by it. But also, whose world vision is reproduced and implemented in the gaze of AI, to use a word from your project. So maybe, Sanjay, you can tell us something more about it, about what values are reproduced and what are the exclusionary patterns that you've noticed in your research.
I think the question of having the parallel discussion around the internet and how the internet develops is interesting. Not to collapse the two things together with AI, but I mean, the internet partly developed from an academic military complex. But then
the ARPANET, no?
Yeah, but then it had certain protocols which were open protocols, which allowed kind of effectively anyone who shared the protocol to be part of the internet. And then the big tech companies came along and kind of created walled gardens. So Facebook became the internet, for instance. So they kind of took over the internet. So when you talk to kids these days, they don't really think about the internet. They think about apps, for instance, instead, which are very much different from the promise of the internet. And the problem with AI I have at the moment is that it simply reproduces this kind of walled garden effect about who develops it, who controls it, whilst it allows a certain kind of democratization of, say, writing. We have very little control about the tools we are using. The tools are effectively very opaque, and we're kind of enslaved by them. And they have a certain mystique to them. You type in something and it'll summarize a really boring set of text and produce a report for you really quickly and think, wow. But I think I like to step back and think, well, what's the context of what's going on here? So, for example, I remember reading an article about working class students being able to improve their university admission statements using ChatGPT. And the argument was it equalizes the field where the middle class students had all the cultural capital in the world they can apply. And so it kind of democratizes it. On one hand, you think, yeah, that's a kind of interesting use of the tool. But then you think, does that really question the structure in the first place of the structural inequality? Or is the tool just kind of effacing that, obscuring that? So in many ways, I think a key problem for me with AI is it's a technology which obscures many different kinds of power relations. So when I think about AI, I don't just think about the interface or the code. I think about it being part of a kind of wider sort of socio-technical assemblage, which is in many ways reproducing many inequalities. Some of the side effects might be that it increases certain elements of where people can participate more or improve their skills. One of the most simplest definitions of technology is it augments human capacities. And AI certainly does, but the conditions it augments our human capacities, for me, in many ways, is quite problematic. And if we are going to have some kind of AI, I think goes back to Sebastian's point, how do we imagine it? Who's it for? Who actually benefits? It seems like the benefits are often side effects, where the real benefits are for big tech and big corporations to concentrate power and try to recreate even greater wealth.
So you seem to be saying the problem is not necessarily AI in itself, but the socio-cultural and also socio-technical context in which it is produced. And another thing that you said that I really liked, it resonates with me, is that sort of mystique. There is some kind of magic for the ordinary user. Like, look at what it did. And so I would like to hear from Tanaya also, because Tanaya will need to leave. So when you have to leave, you just leave. Okay, no problem at all. So how it is from the viewpoint of those that actually work with AI and create AI and code AI, what is the backstage of this mystique, and how would you describe the way in which you, your colleagues, or the industry, sorry if I'm not using the right word, I acknowledge that I'm not, I don't master that jargon, but how do you see the relationship between the technical side, the mathematical model, you said before, what is the mathematical model, and all the political implications that are there?
Okay.
So my first question is, can we unveil the mystique?
All right, so I'll try my best. Can we go back a little bit in time? Like AI, as we know it today, it wasn't built in a day, right? So it existed before. I think around 1970s, there was a big hype that AI is going to take over and everything, and then it went down because we couldn't go beyond, just using some technical terms, a disclaimer, beyond 2 layers of neural network.
Beyond?
2 layers of neural network.
2 layers
now
of
now
neural network.
we have like millions and trillions of parameters.
And in the 70s too?
Let's say tens.
Tens. And now millions?
Trillions of.
Trillions.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a huge step.
So back then, AI also existed, but nobody was interested in them, okay? So people, they were researchers, they were just doing their work, they were solving problems, they were doing science, but there was not much interest from the corporates or from the big techs, the companies. And then there were big hardware innovations. NVIDIA came in, and if you look at, I actually have a nice slide with timeline of why deep learning and AI became so big. It's also associated with hardware development. So a lot of chips became very easily available, they became powerful, and that gave the power of compute. And now the computer scientists could do things that they could not do in the 70s, not because they did not have the mathematics, partly because they did not have the hardware to do all this kind of computation. And that's the first time AI machine learning was shown to be doing something that is meaningful, or at least close to what human can do. And that's when people started taking interest. So if I talk about my career, in 2007, I took my first machine learning class. So I think I used to explain to everybody what it means. Nobody knew what it was, what it does. There was no interest. And now, like everybody wants to know why you are not doing machine learning if you're in computer science.
But what changed? Why do you think at some point it became interesting?
So the hardware development, which triggered like our power to do a lot of compute, that one thing. Another thing is data being available because of huge internet, and you have devices everywhere. So now you can get data very easily, what you could not get earlier. Earlier, getting an image was not very easy. Now you have millions of images very quickly, doesn't cost much. So now you can train both using your hardware and your data quite a lot. And that's when it started showing some signs of result that could be useful for humans. Before that, nobody was interested. And that's when we started seeing companies getting interested in it, and then commercialization. And I often say that when we were doing our PhDs in early 2000s, early 2010s, that's a time when the companies were picking these things up, and there was still more innovation of AI coming from academia. But now if you see, it's mostly companies, big techs, that kind of dominates the big models, or everything that is being used, how they're going to be used. Even in academia, we end up using their models, which is a very different setting than it used to be 10 years ago. So
What happened? Why does it
happened?
happen?
It started giving some results, and companies got interested. More money was poured in.
Yeah, we scholars are good at things that don't produce results. That's
when they
that's
thought
our
that,
specialty.
It's working.
Fair
so
statement.
Now it moved,
Now that it's working.
moved from labs to the reality. I mean, that's happened with most technology. It was in the lab for many years. And then when it started producing some good result, then it moved more towards commercialization. Big techs got interested. And then in the last, after GPT, actually everything just exploded.
The big change for the general public, so to speak, was with ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna ask another question to you, because I need to, take advantage of the time that you are with us. So, but what kind of technical innovation did ChatGPT bring about that it made a difference? Because at some point it became everybody's concern, whereas up until that point, for instance, people like me wouldn't know about neural network. Now I know. So from the technical point of view, what's in there?
So again, it has been a long process. Researchers will know they have been doing these kinds of development to generate natural language for many years. But what was different in ChatGPT was the scale at which they were producing. So the scale at which they were training these models, which are huge models, which takes a lot of money to train, and we cannot basically train them in academia. So that scale up in terms of data and in terms of compute. So that changed the results. So earlier, you could not generalize to unseen questions. Like you can ask ChatGPT any question, it gives you an answer. It may not have seen the questions before. So that sort of power comes from scaling up in terms of data, also in terms of like the models that they could use, because they have huge computational power.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add something. I completely agree with that kind of description, but I think that at some point, this specific type of AI, let's say machine learning, LLMs like ChatGPT, for example, this kind of form of technical progress also found a business model, right? This scale allowed companies such as Google, Microsoft to create a business model out of it by providing the infrastructure or the cloud that would enable the analysis of these huge amounts of data.
Yeah.
So you have, researchers in academia doing very valuable research for decades. I'm not part of that discipline, but that's how I understand it happens.
Because you're too young.
I hope so. But then until this kind of, there were some technical progress that became, profitable. It was when, these technology companies got it and, scaled it and I kind of made it public for everyone, let's say.
Yeah, if you look at like Google or Facebook, they didn't start as AI companies, right? Google was the search engine, then Facebook had the social media, but they all saw the power and the profit that, of course, the companies can make. And as you said, like the clouds were available from Amazon, and basically NVIDIA making all these hugely efficient GPUs. That was a big turning point. I think sometimes people miss that how much hardware development actually speed up the whole process.
You don't need me to talk. You don't need. It's not school. So if you want to add something at any.
Well, I wanted, while Tanaya's here, really, just for you to say a little bit about how film and television were important for your early work, because I think part of our project is revealing the kind of origin story and the memories, how film and television has been forgotten in that early manual machine learning work that you were doing. So I think it would be a really good opportunity to say a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it came up in the discussion yesterday. Before that, I did not know these things could be important to anybody. Like how earlier days we used to train models, like small models. One easy way of getting, I said like getting data was not easy, right? So one easier way of getting human data was using film clips and movies. So we used to use those kinds of clips and movies and painstakingly will draw the bounding box around faces that you see almost in every camera or anything. And they will do it frame by frame. And if it was audio, then we'll do the hand marking, like going seconds, microseconds level sometimes, like who is speaking, what the gender is, things like that. And we used to use a lot of film and television data for that, to train those models. Of course, things have changed now, but computer scientists still use a lot of film and TV data to test their models. Even actions, like what actions being performed, like entire video that you are basically creating now, we can use it for training models and validating models. Postures, actions, spoken words, accents, everything can be used.
Okay, so I'll let you go. Does someone want to ask a question that only Tanaya could answer? Like a technical question? Vincenzo, for instance, do you have like a more... I'm asking Vincenzo because I know that he knows this part of the thing.
I'm nervous.
So, one thing that now is on my mind is that, like, one problem that is, I think, an hour, because like 5 hours ago, the team of OpenAI published like an article that they exposed of the fraudulent group as publicized some, as you said, their model to harm and direction public speech, to harm specific group, or to monopolize the discussion in the USA. And it's very interesting because they like to explain all the movement that they use, and it's not so high technology. It's the system is like created with the help of ChatGPT, with the use of the code. So now one question is that, okay, OpenAI has the right to effectively block this profile, but we have like some limitation in this model, like censorship and other type of things. But now, is that the right way? As so technically speaking, we have the moment to put some control in this system, or we have to maybe rethink how they are built this system.
I love your Napolitan English because I have a Florence English, so I say because, you know, and you have the Napolitan in English. We would be a perfect duo. So basically, you're asking about AI and censorship and whether these models should include some form of censorship or not.
Yes.
Referring to something that happened a few hours ago.
A few hours ago, it's the paper, but this is happening in at least in 1 year that some
1 year.
use for ChatGPT for fraudulent action.
Okay, for fraudulent action. Okay, so it's about regulation and
Yes.
about how do we regulate these mathematical models.
I think that's a big question. I think everybody is asking this question. I don't have an answer for that. But as long as, I think I'll repeat what I was saying earlier, that it's not the technology itself, but the users, right? How we are using it, or the producers, that need to be more mindful. And I am not sure what exactly was the incident that you were referring to. I don't know the incident
What is
that
the
you're referring.
incident that you're referring to? A che cosa ti sei riferito prima?
No, don't understand. It's in particular, I have the document open. It's so 8 different incidents.
8 different incidents. I'm
Yeah.
saying on the microphone.
8 different incidents, and these 8 different incidents is one known as High Five, where a group like to the immigration in the USA to monopolize the discussion in of immigration in the USA. The other one is like Vixen and Chaos Panda. That is another group on the Chinese on the Chinese sphere of the internet. So on Kakao.
What are they doing? That's what I did not understand. So what?
No, it's not that we don't understand. It's that like how it's okay that OpenAI has this power to control effectively what the user do. It's okay that they can act directly to some malevolent effectively action. Okay, this is like.
So it's how OpenAI reacts to potentially fraudulent or misuse.
Yeah, because the fact is that this is a misuse and
This is a misuse,
some
okay?
action that need penal correction, but it's not something that has to be directly on OpenAI, but in this case it's OpenAI that operates directly on it.
So I mean, as far as I understand from the technique, it's not like how technically we can combat that. You're asking whether the platform that is providing this, how they should be held responsible or accountable for that.
It's okay to put maybe a limitation in the model to get the data from the user.
Getting the data from the user, the questions that they are getting from the users.
We are getting lost in translation.
Sorry,
Dimmelo in
sorry.
italiano veloce.
Yeah.
Perché il problema è che loro prendono i dati, perché loro non è che hanno fatto le indagini direttamente da quella parte lì, ma hanno fatto delle indagini di polizia, ma hanno preso i dati degli utenti, hanno controllato sui social media e hanno visto che c'erano queste attività fraudolente.
Quindi è stato OpenAI che praticamente si è preso il diritto di indagare sugli users. Ok, so in these cases what happened is that OpenAI, a company, detected the misuse by getting the data from the users and triangulating with other available data.
Right.
So how has a tech company, the right to investigate on their users, or should we introduce a technical limitation that makes this impossible?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think when we sign into OpenAI and we agree to terms and conditions, it might be written there and they are going to use the data that you put in, like if you're not using the temporary one where they explicitly mention that we are not going to use this data, otherwise they use your data. And think same for Facebook. If you upload your images, they will use your images.
I can just chip in. I'm sure there's other people who will come in. I mean, this opens up a bigger question about the proprietary nature of these platforms. And again, I was talking about how much control we have of this tech, and we have very little control. And that's the same for social media platforms. I kind of, if you sort of roll back a little bit, how these models have been trained, as Tanaya was saying, they literally harvested data indiscriminately, and then they try to make it safe. So they use human reinforcement learning, which actually subjects often workers in the global south to horrific content. This is both for social media and for AI, which is often completely hidden from view. We just see the shiny interfaces that we use in the global north. So, and the question of censorship is interesting because on one level, particularly say with image generation software, when people have looked at the data sets, they find child pornography in those data sets. So my question would be, for these models to operate at scale, for large language models to exist and to be so powerful, they can only do that by indiscriminately harvesting so much data because they need that much data to train on. So fundamentally, we're working with extremely unsafe systems, which these companies then are trying to make safe. I wouldn't use the word censorship. I think because that puts up a whole other sort of debate. I think it's more about these practices, how they've developed, are quite flawed. But because these general models give us the kind of answers we want, we kind of live with that. But yet, we all know the taglines of each model. It might produce inaccurate answers, etc. But that's like a kind of a sticking plaster on something quite more deeply problematic about the very nature of the formation of these systems in the first place. And surprise, surprise, people are going to jailbreak these systems. People are going to misuse them. That's the nature of humans. We do stuff like that. We'll experiment. We'll try to exploit the system. So I'm not surprised at all. ChatGTP, interestingly, have got so much attention because they were the first to release these models, which were relatively safe, where Google was holding back for a long time because they knew how damaging these models can be. But once the genie's out of the bottle, everyone then races ahead. And so they're constantly dealing with the problem of AI safety. And I don't think it can be simply solved. There's no simple technical solution because there's always contingencies and there's always unknown ways people might interact with these systems. So a lot of these companies have what's called red teams, where they actually try to jailbreak their own systems to see where the weaknesses are. But it's a kind of cat and mouse game, unfortunately.
And I think one thing else that I would add is, what is that red line that OpenAI would kind of consider, or any person would consider? I mean, now we can see in politics in the US, what is freedom of speech, what is censorship, what is safe, what is responsible. I think it's very different if you look at it from different points of view, from different people, from different locations in the world. You're going to see things differently. So something that it would be considered at this moment in time, freedom of speech in the US would be something that is considered discrimination in another country, and in a third country would be considered as the rule of the law or as the expected behavior from certain groups of the society. So I think it's quite hard unless there are the likes of international standards group or open groups that can somehow influence these regulations. It is very hard to know which regulation is suiting which part of the society in which part of the world.
I wanted to add one recommendation, because I'm reading at the moment a book by Karen Howe, The Empire of AI, I think it's called. And it's great because she's a journalist, she's not an academic, even though it's very deep, the book, but it really tells like all the nitty gritty behind OpenAI, how it's all about OpenAI, hundreds of pages, how it started, and something that really I found very interesting is that AI safety was super key for the project of OpenAI, that's what they wanted to do. That's why they started as a non-profit. Partly because Elon Musk in particular had this concern, he didn't want any company to kind of release a model that would be too dangerous. So he came up with the idea of creating OpenAI along with Sam Altman. And they constantly had this debate on when to release ChatGPT, right? Because they knew the risks. But then at some point, Elon Musk kind of left. But the team of OpenAI decided that for some reason they were like the best positioned to, release these kind of models in a responsible or safe way. But it's funny to see the evolution, right? How they have kind of completely abandoned the agenda of AI safety, how they became a for-profit company, and that implied, having less kind of safeguards and so on and so forth. But it's a very good book, and because this is a show for non-academics also, I think it's a very kind of catchy and compelling to read.
I just want to add something technical about this. So the most basic model that OpenAI or any GPT these days are based on is Transformer, which is called Transformer, which came from Google, and Google actually open sourced it, and they completely have it like free in just like an academic lab, and that's the kind of driver behind ChatGPT and all other these technical models.
It's in the name, right? I think the name GPT means generative something transformer.
Pre-trained, yeah. Pre-trained.
Pre-trained, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so transformers are the basic of all these LLMs and all the big models. Yeah.
So there's something. Okay, we have put on the table different areas already. We have the technical part. These are models. There's hardware. There's software. There are technical innovations. There is a socioeconomic level, meaning then these are products, services. There is an industry. There are people that make a profit from it. And then the moment that some technical innovation become a widespread means, we could say in a kind of an STS way, an actor on society, then the problem of regulation comes in. How do we regulate? Because law kind of catches up, law catches up on technical innovations. So something is kind of thrown on society, and then we need to understand how to regulate it. Let's think about all that the European Union did when it comes to data and privacy. So there are these levels. And then I would like to think a little bit more with you today about then, okay, if it is an actor on society, if we try to think about AI or even just ChatGPT as a co-agent of our world, then how do you find their, its, his, her gaze? And I'm here drawing on the notion, the idea of the AI gaze for how Jo, Sanjay, and Tanaya are developing in their project. What do you think, maybe Jo, you can answer this question or start sort of throwing, it's not about answering, right? But why do we need to think about this AI gaze? Because a lot of time we think about how we see AI, but how are we seen by AI?
Yeah, I think our project has been really about accepting that, as Tanaya said, the large the models are kind of pre-trained, and there's very little that we're able to do about that in terms of computing power. But we can do something methodological in the sense that we can bring some of that model and iterate with it, slow it down, make things a bit messier. So by showing, in our work, by showing it or asking it to analyse film and television, and in particular representations of older women, we have noticed its kind of sense of that it's not always accurate, and it challenges the whole concept of accuracy in relation to trying to identify the different ages and the same person aging in a film, and the kind of creative aspects of aging, de-aging, prosthetic aging, and then perceptions of age, and then maybe even a concept of screen age as it tries to reference other forms of media and scrape through all the life logging and the other films that it's ever kind of looked at. And so what we've tried to do is observe and think about the machine learning looking at these representations of aging at scale, and then at the same time thinking about that as an intervention in itself, but also as I guess as academics who have closely read objects of study. So let's say your object of study is a film or television text. You know, we've built entire departments of research around reading a text really closely and deeply in terms of its history, and that's a really important cultural and critical way of thinking, slowly, deeply, contextually. And then trying to bring that methodological way of thinking alongside something that is doing kind of the opposite of all those things. And so working together with a non-human kind of actor in terms of our team, and then critically reflecting on each iteration as well. And what we found, we chose those film and television texts, not only because, as Tanaya said, they're part of the hidden history of machine learning as well, because you couldn't simply just always go out without consent at the time and collect loads of images of people. So film and TV, rightly or wrongly in relation to IP, that's how they were modelling. You know, we've really thought about film and TV as something that really challenges machine learning itself in its seeing, while at the same time through Sanjay's work revealing that the critical data justice aspects of this in relation to what those models hold within them, what they can't forget. They can't forget what they were trained on, and we can't extract that out. It has learned a lot of things around, you know, the kinds of faces that have been out in the world for the last however many years that it can scrape from, and the predominance of those faces or whatever they are. So we're not able to get it to unremember all that work, but it's okay, well, what else can we do in revealing that can't forgetting?
And this is sort of going back to what Sebastian was saying before, the exclusionary patterns that are somehow embedded in the AI, because I think there is a little bit of an idea that AI, ChatGPT or AI in general knows the truth because it is unbiased, because it is about data, and the myth of the raw data is still very much there. Leopoldina Fortunati, who was an Italian scholar, did a research lately on young people. I don't know if it is published or not, because she told me over, a pizza in Naples, so I don't know. But she did this research with undergraduate students, and for almost the majority of them, they consider ChatGPT cleverer than themselves, because it is unbiased, because it knows the truth, because intelligence is increasingly associated with computational capability. So, and so I very much like this concept of accuracy, because we tend to think about efficiency, and the whole digital technology has very much produced an ideology of efficiency, whereby everything that is efficient is normatively better, because efficiency, it's all we need. But then what about accuracy? So in what you're saying, and your project is showing, well, it can be a machine learning model can be very efficient at recognizing and categorizing older women on screen. Definitely more efficient than if you put me doing that manually, as Tanaya has said, but that doesn't mean it is accurate. And that has to do with the fact that the AI gaze reproduce the gaze of those that produce it, and also reproduce the gaze embedded in the data. There's not such a thing as a raw datum, or at least so I remember from my exam on the philosophy of science. And when it comes to relationality, so it's also about, okay, if AI is a co-agent, who is working with that? Who gets to collaborate? And so I would like to go back to what you were saying before, Sebastian, about the exclusionary pathway, and what subjects are indeed excluded, and what can we gain from widening in a way the collaborators, so that this AI thing can learn also from other people, not the usual suspect.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think you're pointing at my research in Colombia, I guess. But I wanted to say, just to kind of, structure a little bit the conversation. I think your research looks a bit more at the outputs of AI, so to speak, like generative AI, the kind of texts or images that it can give you. In my research, I have looked at more at the inputs that AI uses to create those outputs in the first place. So that's why I will talk about infrastructure, like data centers or minerals that are used, to develop AI, or even data workers in the global south countries who are paid, very, very low wages, and also have like exploitative conditions that, label the data that then AI or machine learning systems kind of use to train their models, blah, blah, blah. However, in my research, I have looked at the environmental dimension of AI, which comprises two things. On the one hand, the environmental footprint of AI, basically all the resources or, all kind of things that it uses in order to work or develop, comprising minerals, but also energy, water, and so on. And on the other hand, I have also looked at how AI can be used for sustainability. Because if you talk to most of the people or people in the field about the environmental footprint of AI, some of them will tell that this is something I have heard. Oh, it's okay. It uses a lot of minerals, a lot of water, data centers, for example, energy, but then it also has like good uses, right? You can use it for sustainability. And you see that idea replicated in many kind of international organizations and so on, saying that we need AI for climate modeling, for example, to fix the climate, as some old man from OpenAI would say. So basically, I've been trying to look at both sides of the debate. Something interesting that I have found. So in February, actually, I traveled to Colombia because I was interested in projects that might incorporate more people, more voices in this kind of uses of AI for sustainability. And I identified like a very interesting project in the high Andes of Colombia of scientists, mainly biologists, working on plant conservation, but that were also increasingly incorporating peasants or farm workers. It's difficult to translate into English. Campesinos, yeah, who were kind of increasingly participating in this project. And I found it so interesting because I don't want to say that AI is always bad, that everything done with AI, is problematic for different reasons. I also want to see people trying to shape the development of AI in a different direction that incorporates more voices. So that's one example. And even though these kind of peasants have not been super involved in the technical dimension of AI for different reasons, they are part of the project and they are shaping it in different ways. And you can see that the attitude of people using AI when you incorporate more voices is way more humble, right? Like, so usually programmers or sometimes computer scientists that the person who is a computer scientist is not here, but they tend to overstate sometimes the capabilities of AI or what it can do. But when you incorporate more voices, you become more humble and more kind of understanding of the complexities involved. Sorry if it was too long, but.
Improvise.
I'd like to just follow up on that. Is it the case then that are they developing more local models which are specific to certain social problems they're facing or or economic problems which might help them? Where a lot of the problem I have with AI is are these general models which cost a huge amount of money to produce, are unsafe, exploit the global south in terms of the training and labeling of the training data. So when you talk about alternative voices, does that also include alternative ways of building the models which are maybe more specific, more local to certain problems?
It's a completely different logic and scale. You're right in that sense. So I'm actually comparing this kind of small-scale project with a project by Microsoft called Guacamaya that's it's seeking to tackle deforestation in the Amazon. But that's like a way larger scale project that looks at the entire Amazon, Colombian Amazon at least. Whereas this other project, the smaller one that I was mentioning, mainly it's like trying to focus on one more specific problem. And I think that also gets us into another discussion, which is very interesting, foregrounded by a colleague, Alison Powell, which is, it's interesting how sometimes we use the mainstream and alternative models of like framing of different projects. And I think it will be interesting for us as researchers to mess the field a little bit up and try to come up with, projects that are very attuned to the local context, but that also have the ambition to be more larger scale eventually. And on the other hand, larger scale projects that can also be attuned to the local context. Because right now we have this very comfortable situation. You have large scale projects by companies and we criticize them and they're like the bad actors. And on the other hand, we have like small, beautiful projects and it's very easy to foreground them as, very nice and a model to follow. But then what if we kind of mess this up? I do think that we do need large scale AI, maybe not for generative AI for all users, but if you talk to climate scientists, for example, we pretty much need them, right? Because the scale of climate change is so big. Even if we degrow our economies tomorrow, we will need to remove carbon from the atmosphere anyway with technology. So it's highly likely that we're gonna need AI. And the question is how we deploy those AI or AI-driven or AI-supported projects at scale in a way that's kind of just and ethical. But I pretty much like your question because I think that's one of the big questions of the moment.
And there's something else that we haven't really mentioned, but there's something about the talent and the kinds of people like Tanaya, who's not here, staying in the public sector, staying in the university sector, and continuing to produce or at least kind of work with socially just projects. What we found with our project is that it's really difficult to get really talented researchers to stay in universities and AI researchers and machine learning, the highly technical work. They get taken up by industry and they want to go into industry. It pays a lot of money. And so that's the other part of it. It's to what extent do we as universities support financially, but as governments, really invest in this kind of research, and some of it has those origins in really fair, socially just uses, or it wasn't highly corporatized at that time in those early uses. So I do think that's one of the significant problems we're facing as researchers on these kinds of either big interdisciplinary projects or public, third sector, public university projects, is that it's really hard to get the talent because they're not attracted to stay in universities or be part of university projects, and they're moving around all the time, or they go straight into industry where it pays a lot more money.
Yeah, I think I would echo basically what you said, that I think even the ones who are interested, at some level it is becoming more and more difficult as life is basically becoming more expensive and the universities are not able to, or they are not supported to support that. So it's the same with the journalists. So journalists are also some of the lower paid part of the society, and these two groups of people, academics and journalists, are those who are critically looking at these problems, write about them, research about them, and if in a sense they're not funded to an extent that is comparable to the funding in the industry, they are going to go to the industry, and we are going to lose more and more this kind of critical aspect of this AI problem that we are looking at now.
And so again, it's a problem of who is involved and to what extent is involved. Who is an object of AI and who is a subject of AI, who is produced and who is more a producer. And so it's about the web of power, to use a Foucauldian notion, because I read Foucault in my PhD and never sort of get out of that moment. But I would like now to hear some more voices from our either embodied or disembodied audience here. So we have Hal, please.
Yeah, no, I was wondering, because I know you mentioned you work with the BBC, but then really this is a question to all of you, which is just the use of AI in kids media, because we've seen throughout the years that a lot of what sort of the more interesting and innovative kids media, or especially kids educational media, has been doing is like, on one hand, you could say it sort of has functioned as like, insofar as media technologies are seen as harmful, as harm reduction. Like, okay, if you're going to be watching TV, it's better to watch, and you're young kids, better to watch Sesame Street. But okay, also the whole idea of Sesame Street was like, kids remember ads that come on TV. Can't we use this to teach them the alphabet or something like that? And of course, some of these things later had provable educational successes. And of course, questions of educational technology always relate to like, what is childhood for? What is education for? Is the idea of like playing baby Mozart to your kids that they're gonna wake up and they're gonna know how to use all of these things as like marketable skills. But I guess one question is like, have there been major attempts by the BBC or by other people to use AI in educational, especially young kids media in any reasonable context? Has this been able to be done in a way that the AI isn't just used for like cheating on tests or something like that, which is like the bane of all of us here? But like, have there been any efforts in that regard? Is it okay at all to mix kids in AI? Is this inherently ethically a big problem?
So is that a question for me? I have one small or short answer that I know that the BBC has been working on an AI tutor project to kind of help with I'm not sure what age of children, but children at school with some of their work. But at the same time, I don't know, I don't have children, so I'm not very familiar with the children lingo and the programs that they watch and the ways they learn. So maybe somebody who's more familiar can respond.
But can you say something more about this AI children tutor?
So it's basically from the content that the students learn maybe at school or from the programs that's available to them, they can ask questions and the AI tutor can help them with their work. That's kind of the level I know of the project, but there is some information available online, I think, about the project if you look into it. But there are a lot of universities, which is something that I know more about, or even schools, they're all looking into these AI tutors and how to help the students with tutors. And also that comes up also as a discussion in less privileged parts of the society that they're not able to get private tutors and so on, how they can get help from AI tutors. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is the content suited for them or not? That is not something that maybe Sanjay has something.
Yeah, I've got a daughter of school age, so I see some of the tech that she's bringing home in terms of the software her school is using. And for example, there's a program called Century Tech, which helps in English and maths, for instance. I sort of looked it up, and it's a black box in terms of its testability, how efficient it is, or how much does it improve a child's learning? Because basically, it's a diagnostic tool. Child enters work, and then it figures out where the weak points are. Then it'll point the child, oh, you need to improve on this. That's its basic model. Sounds really good in principle. In practice, I don't know whether it actually works or not. When I mean, it's not my field of area, but there's a whole industry around edutech that's developed, massively profitable. Some of the research that's been done on it basically suggests that there's no evidence it improves children's learning. Even bringing a tablet into a classroom does not necessarily improve children's learning, partly because, again, it's a question of labour. What happens is they can invest less in face-to-face teaching and let tools then replace a teacher in the classroom. So there's less contact for kids. And I think at that age, you need teachers. There's a whole issue about Foucault and education is a prison. We don't need to sort of get into that debate. But technology necessarily isn't a solution, but it's sold as a solution to help kids. And there's very little evidence, empirical evidence, that actually that's working. But it's kind of scary because we're all sold by by edutech that it's effective.
So I just maybe add something. Again, I don't know about children, but from my interviews at the BBC that I'm kind of talking to different journalists or creative people at the BBC on how they use AI and how they engage with AI training and AI literacy and how they upskill themselves, or whether or not they feel like they need to learn AI. One of the things that I've noticed is how the younger journalists learn and like to learn is quite different. So the older journalists maybe like to have somebody in the room or online but live, or even some content that they can go and look into, more structured, more formulated. Some of the younger journalists that I've talked to, they're not really interested in that. So I think the way of learning between children, younger people, and it varies in age. So the expectation is a little bit different, and they don't really have a lot of interest to take one course from beginning to the end. So they've told me we have learned it ourselves and from YouTube and within our own time. So just as a comment to Sanjay, that maybe children have different expectations, whether or not it makes education better or has a better result, I don't know, but I think they just like different tools.
I think it also has to do with the degree of intimacy that we have with the machine, or with technology itself. Now that's the idea I'm flirting with lately, which is this idea of artificial intimacies, because it looks like that the ways in which people use AI, it is quite intimate indeed. So we ask them, I'll give it a them, to be a tutor. It's a tutor. It's a master signifier in the life of a kid, but also of an adult, a tutor, a mentor. And then another field in which, how is it called, generative AI, the ChatGPT kind of thing, is really having a huge impact is mental health. So now, for the NHS, I was told by someone I trust, I didn't fact check, but the entry level is an AI therapist. And then you can work up to a psychoanalyst-ish. But that is really, takes months. So if you don't kill yourself before, then you'll get there. But the entry level is that. And again, on the one hand, it's kind of scary. I mean, I've been over 10 years in Lacanian psychoanalysis, so for me, like, Lacanian psychoanalyst is really different from an AI because they don't say anything, and ChatGPT says a lot, so they're very, very different. But also, on the other hand, that there's a question of access, and there's a question of cost, because who can afford how it's called, mental health support, and can a national health system under increasing financial pressure offer, what kind of service can it offer? But then I think another level is also what you said. Well, for me, it may be weird and even uncanny to think of having ChatGPT thing as a shrink, but maybe for another person that is not necessarily true. So it's also how we relate to AI as a subject, and what we ask. And we did a project with the master students this year on love and AI, sex and AI, and most of them, they were looking at educational uses. So like a sex therapist or a sex educator or a love educator. And that also points at the lack of the so-called affective and sexual education. So I think that, again, the AI gaze tells something about the state of society even before, and also, on the other hand, by the way different people look at AI, we can unveil a lot of dynamics. So this idea of artificial intimacies is the one that goes around my mind. Do we have other voices, other questions? David, I'll throw this. No, I don't think this.
I'm not sure I had a question, but I'll formulate one. I thought this was really interesting discussion. Thank you. I was struck actually earlier before when Tanaya was given her account of the kind of history of AI, how it felt quite almost synonymous with, or was essentially, a kind of history of computing power. That that it was kind of about the development of computing power. And I'm wondering, generally, and she kind of touched on this, whether there's a moment, how can we distinguish between what's the distinctive AI bit of AI, which distinguishes it from just the powerful logistical instrumental reason of computing power. And I seem to remember in the history of AI, in the kind of like in the sort of the in the imaginaries of AI from science fiction, etc. But also I think in things like the Turing, imminent in some things like the Turing test, there was a moment when machines would become sentient in some way, touching on some of the things you've just been talking about, that there'd be a kind of a sense of the AI taking a role, a kind of benign role in looking after people in various ways, in looking after us, in solving problems for us. Where did that go? Where did that kind of promise, that sort of utopian promise kind of go? And I guess I wonder, is the sort of things that we're seeing now in and around the problems around ChatGPT, the kind of hallucinations of AI, the fact that the kind of the mass production of basically incorrect information, what the kind of the implications of that are, given that it's established itself as this particular kind of trustworthy voice within kind of various forms of public discourse. Hey, that wasn't bad, was it, for being sprung on me? Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's a very interesting question about what happened with this, or what's particular about AI, what makes it intelligent compared to regular computing. And I would think that different groups within the field would give different answers. So I would say that the field, if you look at the history, has been split between two big groups called symbolic AI or connectionist AI. So if you are a symbolic AI person, you will say that that's intelligent about it is that as humans, computers can, for example, learn kind of high-level rules and apply it to different contexts. So you don't have to explain or describe the entire world, but just give the computer like some insights, and then it's going to be able to deploy it in other places. And for symbolic AI people, that's what will make it intelligent. On the other hand, thank you, which is, I think, more like the hegemony, if you want, within AI at the moment, is the connectionist paradigm. So for that paradigm, learning is not, or being intelligent is not about having high-level kind of statements and then apply it in the world, but rather learning from, observing from, having data and being able to create categories without any kind of previous input. So that's the model that we have right now. For example, the idea is that you give computers a lot of data, which is why we were talking about data is so important, the amount of data that we have at the moment, and it's able, without any human telling them anything, to create categories. So you will give the computer images of cats and dogs, and it's going to be able to tell you these seem to be two different kind of animals, and eventually describe them without much human input or with little human input. And the thing about data and computing, why it's so important, is because first, the amount of data that you have to give to the computer, and second, the analysis of each pixel, for example, of that image requires a lot of computing power. So that's why computing is so important for the paradigm that we have now of AI. Now, something I wanted to say, that's not the only type of AI that we can have. So one of the problems with the connectionist paradigm is that it has some issues with accuracy, as we were talking, right? Hallucinations. So some people have been saying maybe we can experiment and try to come up with, a mix between symbolic AI or connectionist AI, or try a different kind of path. But the problem, and I'm going to connect it with another thing we've been discussing, is that the connectionist model is very profitable, because the same company that provides you with AI, Microsoft, for example, either directly or through its partner OpenAI, is the same one that provides you with cloud computing, and storing and processing data is very expensive. So that's how they make money, right? Basically telling you, use more AI, and the more AI you use, the more dependent you become on their infrastructure. So the problem with not having much AI experts in academia is that right now most of AI research is shaped by companies which have profit motives, which is fine, but we're missing, I guess, like research that looks at that kind of might try to change the paradigm. Maybe one that's less profitable but better for society in different ways. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, I think I don't think we have lost it entirely, because I think that, you know, we've talked a lot, and we do talk a lot about the harms, but the reverse of that is the care and the caring modalities. And I think perhaps we haven't lost it in the cultures of caring that AI replicates that we want access to. We all want access to our PA or our concierge or the butler service or the air steward's kind of rhetoric of I will come and help you, and you know it's really turbulent right now, but don't worry, look at my calm exterior and I'll get everything for you. So there's that kind of service model of how it's giving us a culture around caring, and that might be through an entry-level care that is free, and then you get up to the real caring that costs. But I think there's something in there about we are still getting it discursively when we go into ChatGPT or Claude or any of them. Is, you know, I'll care in an obsequious way and serve you very quickly. And you can actually see it written. It's always apologising for something. And whenever I ask it a question, it's usually apologising. So I think there's something about that we want, and we need that intimacy of someone talking to us in that really super caring way that AI is giving us. So some of that promise is there, just in the culture of it.
But I guess what I would ask is, what's missing in our society that a ChatGPT can kind of maybe fulfill in a certain kind of way. So there's that issue. I mean, you probably think I'm completely anti-AI. I'm not. But I think, like, say in the case of mental health, if I was ever to use a language model, I want to know how it's been trained. And I would never want to try to use a general model that, you know, because we have no idea about what kind of answers it might produce. And there's been some very remarkable cases of kids asking AI about their parents, and the AI eventually saying, you need to kill your parents, that will solve your problem. I mean, maybe it's very Freudian, I don't know. Yeah. But literally that can happen. Okay, there might be edge cases, so, you know, often they're dismissed. But it does go back to the question of how responsible are really these models, and how are they being rolled out? Because they're seen as more efficient, it's cheaper than employing real therapists. So that's my question, this automation of society and the acceleration of automating all kinds of things. There's one hand, like say you're a farmer, a tractor's really useful. It helps you become more efficient. But when you start applying it to certain other fields like education or mental health, they're more brittle, they're more fragile, those spaces. And we're not, you know, like AI is kind of like this train that's left the station, and regulation is way behind the curve of the development of AI. And then there's the whole corporate structures of lobbying governments and constantly pushing back the question of safety and regulation for profit. So I would like to see, you know, non-profit modes of AI development. I think we'd have different kinds of AI, and maybe we'd have, like you're saying, Sebastian, models which might not be as efficient, but they're more accurate potentially, they're safer, and they're more transparent, they're less opaque. Because one of the problems with current connectionist models, particularly in neural nets, we don't really know how they work. The software developers don't know how they work. They tweak the weights of them, the inputs, outputs. So we don't know what the AI gaze is. What is it seeing itself? We just see the results of that. And for me, I find that quite problematic. I think we need to be able to know what these technologies are and how they work, and in fact we don't.
Can I pass the question of transparency and accountability to Bahareh?
Yes, what about that specifically?
What do you think from your viewpoint?
So transparency and accountability are obviously huge problems when it comes to AI and when it comes to journalists' use of AI. one thing that the journalists often need to do whenever they're reporting on something, there's different guidelines and rules, but for example at the BBC would be they need to have two original sources if their own reporter is not on the field. And this story with technology, when journalists use it, is treat, for example, any information from the internet as any other source that you would. Same is with AI. Treat AI as any other source and don't rely on that. But the problem is when it comes to accountability and transparency, we don't know how it is generated. So there is no transparency there. And then when we don't know how it is generated, what is behind it, what data has been involved in training of this model, we can also not necessarily be accountable because we don't know what's been happening there. So if somebody needs to be accountable, then using AI could be problematic. Or if they are using it, there need to be very specific and very clear rules and regulations and disclosure agreements and so on how AI has been done, in what extent, in what process, and what is communicated to the user and to the audience.
So I just wanted to point out two things. First, that the main AI company is called OpenAI. So that's so interesting, and it's not very open, right? We know how opaque it is, but it's interesting because at the moment, I don't know how it has developed. I read this a few months ago, but there seems to be two paradigms within AI companies. So on the one hand, you have OpenAI, which doesn't really disclose much information about the training of its models, like the parameters or the criteria, so to speak, that it uses, or weights, it's a very technical concept, but let's say criteria that it uses to train its models. And on the other hand, Meta, the parent company of Facebook, they say that they want to go like farther into openness and transparency. So they want to provide the weights or the criteria that they're using to train their models. The problem is that people from OpenAI and other circles, they say that that's actually dangerous because you can have, malevolent or maleficent people using those kind of. It's related to the discussion that we had before. We have like some actors that might misuse that kind of information. So that's why OpenAI, according to them, are kind of not releasing all the information of their models. Now, this has been also, again, I want to point out to Karen Howe's book because it's so good. It has been like a constant question for OpenAI, and I love because at the beginning they had this promise of like openness and transparency, but then over time they came up with different kind of justifications, excuses, or arguments to become more and more close to fulfill what they consider to be their mission, which is to provide safe AI for humanity.
And this is what Vincenzo was saying before about safety and censorship, accountability, transparency, regulation, freedom, and the incidents can unveil these contradictions.
The conversation has been very focused on like this infrastructure of what we put inside the AI and how then the machine learning works, et cetera, and how safe it is, and then how people make decisions or use AI. But I really wanted to, because take out AI from the picture, the way that many companies work, and if you talk with people who work in private businesses, they call consultants like Bain & Company and McKinsey, and for them it's also kind of like someone would use ChatGPT. It's a black box, and should we do this project? Oh, McKinsey says so. So, McKinsey has all this knowledge and know-how. So yeah, let's do this project. And with COVID as well, like it doesn't matter your position on lockdown. I think lockdown was the right decision, but you can't argue that many of the political actors their judgment was very based on a scientific, like on scientism, which really kind of handicapped like their political judgment on if lockdown or no lockdown, or what should be our strategy to deal with this pandemic, etc. So you have the fact of how we're going to use AI, etc. It is, of course, in the infrastructural models and how we make AI, but it's also in our culture, which is very rationalist, which is very scientific, which has all these kinds of biases, and if we don't get if academia can't make its own large models, such as OpenAI or Anthropic or other AI companies can, because they have all this access to private capital, etc. I mean, we can try to make a difference in the culture and show how, in the summer in Lisbon, I went to an AR workshop and someone showed me this visual representation of a neural network that I believe Google did. So it's basically two plaques, right? And there's like all these strings of I mean, I don't know the technical term because I'm not a computer scientist, but the neural network itself, even the best computer scientists in the world won't be able to explain to you exactly what happens, right? Because you have all this data, which the last time that OpenAI published what did they use for the data, I think 30% was basically like Reddit posts, so that's the level that we're dealing with. But they themselves don't know, and you see, and I'm saying, like, when I say that companies, or I mean, if humans or students, 18-year-olds, use ChatGPT and we judge them, I mean, Warner Brothers currently selects their roster of films with this AI software. So how are we expecting that people are going to be responsible when it's a cultural problem, it's an ideological problem? So there's the technology will continue, but if we make this effort to try to tell people, it's a black box and you're not getting too much value out of it, maybe that can make more of a difference than all this infrastructural talk that we don't have resources for, and people are not even going to hear us because they have all these biases.
But I just have a question. Who's we and who's the people?
Oh, we is you're trying to do an AI collective, and we're the responsible ones, people in OpenAI.
We're not, right?
They're really not. No.
Yeah. So we are not either. So there is no we to go to tell the people what is right and what is not right, or what is good and what is not good.
I mean, I think we is the people who. I mean, you're in academia, or we have less power over this, and the technologists do.
Yes. So you mean people who are not the big tech, or the ones outside of the... Yeah, well, I mean, the idea is that it would be very good if we could make an impact, but the problem is the we that you're talking about are also the we that's not heard as much. It's the we that doesn't have as much power. So then the question becomes how this we can be heard at all when it comes in front of the power, when it comes in front of the big tech, when it comes in front of the big capitalism.
Well, but we've been seeing political shifts of people who had no power at all, were at the outskirts of public discourse, and suddenly, people who had lots of power and had basically a monopoly of discourse and of information, etc., have way less power than in the 1990s, and the other ones that were in the outskirts of society now have a lot of power. Are not wielding it responsibly. While I would say that everyone in this room is probably more responsible than many people in OpenAI, etc.
So in this room, we haven't lost faith in the revolution.
No, I do have faith in revolution
when
it comes to AI. So something I wanted to say related to what you were saying is, how to resist AI or how to, provide more agency to ordinary people when it comes to these kind of things. And I think that there are very promising things going on, and we need to highlight them. So there are artists who are mobilizing against, intellectual property theft. There are, in the case I studied, a case in Santiago, in Chile, opposing the construction of a Google data center that got canceled in the end after local opposition. There are data workers unionizing in, Africa and so on. So there is a lot of agency, and I think look at the infrastructure is super important. It's not, also depends on where you are standing. So I went to a conference on AI recently to South Africa, Cape Town, and the main topic was critical minerals. In the global south, we don't see critical minerals. I'm based here right now, but it's taken for granted, right? It's not considered. Sometimes I went to a conference and I told them, no, I look at AI, critical minerals, and they were like, oh, no AI itself. And I was like, well, what does it mean, right? Like, minerals don't count as AI, but then you go to the global south, and it's the main topic. You mention AI, and critical minerals come to the fore, for example. So also what matters and what mobilizes people change according to the location, the context, and so on. What I think it might be the next step and something we can help as academics, and acknowledging the power that we have in this kind of global north university, for example, is to try to maybe facilitate, the generation of solidarity among these groups, so we can better see the connections between them, and create maybe a block of people, like affected or mobilizing in relation to AI. But I think that that's already happening. I think that will be like my message, and we have to foreground those voices instead of think what we can do as researchers. It's already happening, and the question will be how we can help, how we can support those groups.
Just one thing I want to say. I think the reason that I highlighted the we is that we should not forget that you mentioned that most of us or all of us in this room are more responsible than people outside of here. So I don't think that is the case. That's a very kind of supremacist, elitist kind of view, to assume that we sitting here know better than people outside of this world, or know better than people outside of academia or outside of this country, or whatever that we are putting our we around. So I think we should not forget that we are not better, or we are not in any way. We cannot be the voices of certain people who are living on the ground and be here as a hero or as somebody who wants to save the world, pretending that we can multiply their words. But we can create venues, perhaps, to facilitate or to make our own small effort to have some people heard, without forgetting that there's no such thing as we who's saving everyone.
Yeah, I'd echo that. There's something about in the AI debate of certain parts of universities becoming kind of splendidly isolated in some way, or somehow safe sanctuary spaces, or I don't think that's the direction we'd want to think of ourselves or go in. I think, as I've said in other kind of fora, I think around this in particular, I think that the public, if it is outside of academia, if we want to say that, and of course we are all members of the public, just so we know, the public probably does have to understand the role of universities. It has to, I think, I always feel it has to, right now anyway, particularly with the attacks on universities or the criticisms of universities across the world, or particularly in the global north and the west and America and the UK and Europe, is that the general public does have to fall in love with universities again and understand what the purpose of a university is. And we also have to understand, or at least explore or express, our purpose more than we do, and the purpose of research as well, and teaching and educating. So we are educating generations of people, and that's one of the most impactful ways. I've probably had more impact by teaching one student in my life than I've had by all my research and face-to-face interactions with one student have probably had more impact for me than all the research I've ever done and all the books I've ever written. So being an educator in that kind of personalised way is really, really important. So that's what I'd say. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Some cheers in the audience.
So,
which is good.
Jo, at the beginning you asked me, are we really going on for 2 hours? Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, yes. We've made it. I know that there might be other questions in the room, and then perhaps we can have a chat after, we can just have a chat now, basically. But then you can stand up and drink and eat and do whatever you want. So thank you very much. I hope that this experimental format gave you the opportunity to have an interesting chat. Surely it was very interesting for me, and I think also for the people that are here. And speaking of patterns and formats, there's somehow we always end up with this question, okay, so what do we do, and who are we, and what role do we play? And I think this is the right question to end this kind of conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let's
Thank you.
applaud
Thank you.
ourselves. Woo!